So welcome back, everyone, for the second panel of the day. So we're going to be turning now to one of the most, I think, persistent and challenging threats to the manufacturing sector today, and that is ransomware. Should come as no surprise to most of the people here. The thing with ransomware, it can either target very specifically target OT equipment we've seen in the past, but more of the ransomware that we see is not particularly targeted, but can definitely impact systems within the IT side, within the IT and the OT, and within the OT. So it's kind of like all of those keys and borders that we talk about with regards to technology get blurred very quickly. For me, and here at TakePoint Research, the focus with ransomware is how does it impact your ability to deliver your product or service to your customer. Once that's interrupted, that's where the value is at risk. So manufacturing is now, according to a number of different sources, one of the top targets for ransomware. And I guess with good reason, because of what I just mentioned, is that attackers don't need that deep OT expertise really to cause disruption when using ransomware. They just need to hit at the right point in the chain to halt production or to delay delivery. And the business impact is immediate, right? And then it's a question, okay, how do we react? Or how did we prepare? How do we react? So we're going to head into this panel. And as always, feel free to submit your questions on the Q&A button, and we'll try and get to as many as we can during the session. And to kick things off, so one of our other panelists backstage will be joining shortly. And we literally have a vendor, an integrator, and an enterprise. That's kind of like one of those jokes where a vendor, an integrator, and an enterprise walk into a bar, but in this case, it's a panel discussion. So we have this sort of whole value chain here. So let's get our panels introduced. Amit, why don't you introduce yourself to the community?
Absolutely, Jonathan, and thank you so much for inviting here. Hi, everyone. This is Amit Pawar. I work with Xage Security. I handle their solution advisory and services for them. I'm based out in Dallas, Texas. Very familiar and have burnt my hands multiple times in manufacturing environments, and there are learnings that I'll be sharing with you. Hope you all learned something new today. Nice to meet you all.
Great, thank you, Amit. And Navdeep?
Yeah, thank you, Amit. Thank you for handing me over. Actually, I'm Navdeep Johar. I work with LTI Mindtree, one of the very biggest system integrator. And I drive the complete anatomy of Convert Security Solutions, which includes IoT, OT, IT, physical data all together. Based on the use cases from which we are facing from our customers, I create the solutions. And I can claim that I'm one of the IoT pioneers from Cisco from my previous life. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And as I said, Adnan will be joining us shortly. He's just sorting out some technical issues. So we will kick off and I'll get him to introduce himself very quickly when he does join, which he just did. Perfect timing, Adnan. Would you like to introduce yourself to the panel?
Hi guys, my name is Adnan Ahmed. I'm head of ICT and CISO working at Ornua. Ornua is a dairy food company. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. We are the largest exporter of dairy products out from Ireland to over 110 countries.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And you arrived just on time. Fantastic. So we have the vendor, the integrator, and the asset owner here. So it's going to be a it's really an ecosystem. So let's dive into the questions. So I guess let's start here in your sort of estimation, the way you see it. What has led manufacturing really to become this industry of choice, if you like, for ransomware attackers? And maybe we can start with Adnan from the asset owner side, the enterprise side.
I think from my perspective, as I'm representing in manufacturing, we are particularly in the food sector, is the environment is not in the whole OT area is not invested as if you compare with like nuclear environment or any other like regulated industries like pharmaceutical. So I see a big gap in terms of investment. The manufacturing sector, you won't find a non-production PLC. There is no concept of non-production production lines. You only have a production lines. Investment is one element of it. And then the awareness element of it. But last number of years, when there are a number of breaches happen, it is one of the top agenda at the board level because of the number of breaches happening. So I would say from the manufacturing sector, what we are noticing is lack of investment, lack of awareness, and also a cohesion between IT and OT that they need to work together. If you ask a CEO of the company, if there is a breach happen in a manufacturing sector, who they are going to call, or she is going to call, the answer would be it's a CISO. But CISO is not given the ownership or accountability or responsibility to manage OT devices. They are being managed by operations. So it can only work if there is a relationship between IT and OT, operations guys and CISO from the security side, and they work together, because ultimately is the operations in individual factories, they own the production lines, but they are not really aware of how to manage the security. So that comes from the CISO role. So I think they have to all work together to understand. So that's one of the reasons I think the industry is not mature enough as compared to other industries. The equipment that are being used is quite old. The life cycle of OT equipments it's very common to have over 20 years. And to replace those equipments, it costs millions. But from manufacturing perspective, it doesn't add a value to just replace a PLC just because there is a security issue. So they will replace it if for us, we produce butter. If I'll go to my production, the operations director and say, I need to replace this PLC, he or she is going to replace only if it's going to see I can produce more butter rather than is going to be more secure. So that's the main difference I'm saying. It's in the industry, it's not as mature as any other regulated industry, but regulations are coming. As I am based in Dublin, Ireland, we have a new network information security and NIS2 regulations coming up across the EU, and that's giving us leverage to explain to our board and executive that what's the main benefit of and why we need to be catching up as compared to other industries.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Amit or Naftiv, would you like to add to those points?
Absolutely, and I completely agree with Adnan. And this is not just with food industry. I mean, you go to consumer products, that's the same problem that these guys also face. And yes, regulations, food industry, or where you are manufacturing food products, yes, regulations are there, but there is consumer space as well, consumer product space. I mean, are there any regulations over there? You talk about markets in US, absolutely not. And like Adnan mentioned, I mean, legacy devices, then you have the swarm of vulnerabilities that are going to be there. And then you keep detecting these vulnerabilities and you can't do apparently anything about it, right? So that becomes a problem. Third-party access as well. I mean, there are multiple ways to get inside the environment. That's where ransomware attackers and everyone, they have multiple pathways to get into these environments. It's much easier to get in than any other environment. So, yes.
Yeah, I will
Fine, so-
like to add a little, Jonathan here,
Sure.
very well covered by both of my colleagues here. So and it was touched a little bit, but I want to highlight that digitization, what is happening across industrial verticals, including manufacturing, actually is a double-edged sword, what we can say. So as the advanced technologies like artificial intelligence and Internet of Things, big data analytics, they are getting into these verticals, including manufacturing. We have to be very careful that we have to be very cohesive with the approach that especially in the manufacturing vertical, which is a little bit lagging behind than other verticals, as Adnan mentioned. So we are seeing basically the 4 types of main problems. One is lack of asset visibility. It was mentioned very clearly. A lot of blind spots. And for manufacturing, especially, we need 100% availability from the OT perspective. So that is like a bottleneck. And then the second one is lack of convert security, which is IT-OT convergence is not there yet. Because there is a lot of lack of OT foundational infrastructure which is missing, right? So OT network is becoming core of operations in manufacturing, but at the same time, we are thinking of increasing the operational equipment efficiency, other stuff. So that is not happening. And the last is increased complexity of network infrastructure, right? All these digital tools are being brought, you're using AI, etc. But we have to keep in mind the interoperability challenges, like different devices and systems may not communicate effectively because OT world is different than IT world as far as protocols go, right? And there can be a lot of latency increase about it. So we have to keep in mind the network infrastructure, and also all these four bottlenecks are there, which is making manufacturing uh, very much vulnerable to the ransomware attacks. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, all good points, I think there. And I guess like for organizations that know, or I think some people um, are aware that they're probably behind on ransomware defenses, right? At least with regards to particular defenses that need to be set up in manufacturing as opposed to some of those other regulated industries, I guess. So what do you think is the most impactful step they can take in the short term, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, to really reduce their exposure, but without doing a major complete overhaul and massive projects? So we talked about some quick wins in the first session. So I think again, it's sort of like what would be the next best action to look at reducing this exposure in a sort of shorter term. Adnan, would you like to kick us off there?
Yeah, I'll give a short answer and the long answer. So to
Mm-hmm.
explain to audience, one is what you would like to do in 3 to 6 months, and then in years to come, 2 years,
Yeah.
1 year, 3 year time. So it's better to explain both ways. Short term, you need to know what you have. So asset visibility is number one priority. If you know what you have, you can protect. And once you know what you have, I'll give you one example. We found in one of our factories that all the devices we found out, but what another thing we found out, those devices were not connected to our network. So from security perspective, it's fine. As long as your device is not connected to your network, it's not consuming IT, the risk of breaches is far less because they are not connected. You are only worried about the physical security. So asset visibility is number one. And then once you have the asset visibility, you know what you have, then look for network segmentation. And third one is remote access solution. So make sure that you know how your users are connecting, especially in manufacturing. When a company is deciding to acquire another factory, this is the last thing they think about security. What they look for is, is the business outcome? Is this the right factory that we need to buy? And it becomes then a headache of the security guys to make sure you can align those. They may have their own tools available. The maturity of even factories among the same company could be totally different, and how you produce. And then same as when you're looking for budget, it depends on which factory you're talking about. If it is crown jewel factory, it's a lot easier to get the budget. But if it is a factory which is down for a few days and no one even talked about it, then it's very difficult to get the budget. So short term, you look for asset visibility. Once you have the visibility, you know what you have, you know your crown jewels, then look for how you can protect. Are they really exposed? One example, if they're not connected to network, don't worry. Look for the ones which are connected. And if they're connected, do they have direct internet access? If they do have internet access, look for how you can protect it, and look for remote access solutions to make sure you have governance all over it, rather than every factory is trying to access different ways and you have no clue or you have no visibility. Long-term answer is you have to look for IT and OT strategy. You have to have a strategy agreed with operations guys. You can't just create a strategy as security person like myself and then without the buying from the operations guys. They own the product. We don't own it. They own PLCs. We can't touch their PLCs. It's like you touch it, you own it, and you fix it. And we have no clue about how to fix a PLC. So we can't apply any patches. We can't do anything on operation lines without the buy-in from the operation. So number one is IT and OT strategy. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a steering committee, which is buying from both sides. Once you have that one, then look for a list of projects. Asset visibility is number one. Once you have that one, then you look for the network segregations to make sure IT and OT are not directly trying. So in the manufacturing sector, is very common. I'll be surprised somebody saying they are not, unless they have already done it. Third one, you look for then network remote access solutions to make sure they are controlled, backup of those environment, making sure you're patching. Another area you should look for around shared OT devices. The devices are built by IT, managed by IT, used in OT. So what we normally forget about it, if you have a laptop, normally in your company, you patch once a month. You have a patch Tuesday thing. But are you really patching those devices which are using on the production environment? No, you're not. But it doesn't mean that you should be patching every month, but you should look for every quarter, every 6 months, every year. So you look for those things, making sure that go bit by bit and then start improving 2 to 3 years. If you try to do everything in one go, it's very difficult to gain the success, because from the board perspective, from the exec perspective, they would like to see visibility. They would like to see the progress being made. And once you start showing the progress, you'll get the budget, you'll get the buy-in. That everything will follow. But you have to start from making sure that the execs understand, you have steering committee, you get the approval, you have the budget sorted, then you look for visibility, then other steps will come as part of this whole transition journey.
Yeah, all great points. And on the chat, actually, somebody linked in that even when you have transient devices, right? So a laptop, like a PLC programming laptop that's being used and moved around possibly, it's not going to be connected all the time. So it's not just the ones, some devices may never be connected, some are connected permanently, and some are transient and moving around. So they're all good points as well. I just remind folks to put their questions on the Q&A as opposed to the chat if possible. Perfect. Let's move on. And I guess just taking a step back to look at what sort of changes you've seen in the industry side, over the past 12 months or 24 months, for example, since ransomware is becoming such a large challenge for the industry. Have you seen a big surge in companies trying to get their defense in order? Are they responding? If so, what sort of defensive measures have you seen people putting in place? And I guess this is more towards Navbib, for example. You're seeing a lot of companies out there. What do you see them doing? How are they moving first? How does that compare to the suggestions that Adnan gave?
Yeah, so they are. So when we start gauging our customers, right, we see that as per my visibility, interacting with so many customers, there are only 60% of the organizations which are aware of security maturity to be done, basically, and only 30% organizations are doing asset discovery, right, finding unknown assets, etc. And only 10% organizations are doing integrations and optimizations, or in other words, we can say remediation. So see the paradigm difference, right? So when we throw these questions to our customers and we start assessing, that's the inflection point we have, that where our customers are. Are they very proactive in doing remediations, which just falls in 10% bucket? So then when we see those type of customers, then we really switch gears to the highest throttle and coach them that now what is the next step? Next step is implementing defense in the depth architectures and all those things, which I will cover later. Maybe if somebody asks the question, but right now, this is what we are seeing. So OT foundational infrastructure is of course lacking, but customers are also learning very fast, right? They are also very much familiar with operation equipment efficiency, how to bring them up. On the networking side, they are following strictly, most of them converge plant-wide Ethernet architectures and maturing them for governance, right? And then, of course, they are getting aware of compliance and certifications because they are going through some audits also later on. But overall, the punchline is that, which somebody can take home, is that only 60% are aware of the security maturity to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit or Adnan. Did you want to?
Absolutely, Jonathan. So one thing, and like Navdeep and Adnan kind of touched on this topic, what we see a lot is, I mean, there is what are the right ways of solving a problem, right? We know the environment is old. We know we have legacy devices. We know there are flat networks. So where to start with, right? Adnan kind of gave 3 pointers to it. What we are seeing, and we as a product company as well into zero trust and everything, we are seeing that these things get quite reactive, right? If there are some ransomware, then we are kind of acting it. What we are suggesting and we are thinking customers are kind of moving toward a protection and prevention mechanism as well, right? I mean, after you perform the discovery that you know what assets you have, you at least have some sort of protection and prevention mechanisms. That I know there is a vulnerable device. I know there is a vulnerability which I can't fix, and I saw a question in chat as well. That patching is something that can't be done on regular basis in OT environments. I mean, that requires downtime. And guess what? Not just downtime. I mean, there 95% of the time, I mean, there might not be a patch available for those systems. So what do? And then you can't even replace the device because operators are not going to change that, or factory owner is not going to change that unless that device stops working, right? So that device is going to be there. So you can have protection mechanisms like role-based accesses, or you are controlling east-west traffic as well, so that you are kind of creating a container around those devices so that no access or is available. Kind of eliminating the exposure of the vulnerabilities that these devices might be having. So this is one approach that we are seeing a lot of people are adopting to as well to move quickly.
Yeah, great points. Here's an interesting one. And this is one that we get a lot. And it's interesting because I saw a question in the chat that sort of went the other way as well. But this question is, what would you say to folks who argue that ransomware is not an OT problem? What would be your response? Amit, why don't you come back at that one?
Yeah, it's a dangerous misconception. I mean, I would just say that if anyone thinks that ransomware is not an OT problem, well, I mean, you'll have to wait till that happen, and then you will realize. I understand. I mean, PLCs, these are not getting locked down, but these are connected to IT systems. I mean, you have HMIs, you have historians, you have engineering workstations, and guess what? Once they stop working, once they get locked down, there's no other system that's going to work in your factory. So yes, probably you may be right about PLC, but what about the connected system that it has? And once those system gets down, guess what? Your manufacturing line or probably the factory as well will get down. And I don't have to tell it to anyone. I mean, there will be, 1 hour of production loss that translates into the money. And then there are answers that are requested by senior management. So yes, I mean, people think that, but there is straight away. I mean, it's a dangerous misconception.
I think it goes back to that myopic view of your role in the organization. And when we speak to the clients, we always try and focus them, regardless of their role, but go back to the very beginning and say, okay, how does your company make money, right? You work for this company, surely you know how and where the revenue is made. And have them step outside of their role for a second, and then have a look in this particular case on this topic, where how could ransomware impact the company, not the technology, not the OT, the IT, the whatever T, and then walk back down to their role. And then you see often the light go on when you manage to focus them at that level, and they go, yes, if it's going to impact the company's ability to produce or to deliver, there's no point. The production line's still going. When you can't deliver, you can't satisfy the orders, you can't get it out. Sometimes it's perishable goods that if it keeps going, you can't get them out, you're losing money anyway. And like you said, there are a lot of systems that have something T, OT, IT in that environment that are definitely not just control systems. So I think that's all very good point. And I think we need to stop focusing on the technology first and looking at the value at risk at the business, and then working it back to our own sort of individual role. Nadeep or Adnan, did you want to add something there?
I'll add 1 or 2 points. The first thing, I agree 100% with Amit, what he's saying, because we are sitting in the industry and we are seeing this is happening. One another point I wanted to add is, and that's how I convince the exec and then my peers, is one of the time you have PLC, HMI, SCADA machine, all those. What if there is a ransomware attack? Those devices are down. That's common. It's not really rocket science. If these devices are down, production stop working. I pick up this from another angle. What on my production line, there is a weight sensor or there's a metal detector. So we produce butter and we have a metal detector. What if the hacker is always saying yes to all the goods are being produced? And we pack all those, ship it to all of our distributors, and it's in your shelf, in your freezer, at your home. And what if you have consumed it? And the hacker will call me after 2 weeks saying, you know what, that metal detector was not working. Product recall. Think about that one. And then the reputational damage. People could die because of that. So it's not only about ransomware where you see a blue screen and you can't produce. What if you have produced a malfunction product? And they will call you after 2 months. You're held ransom about it. You could kill people in the food industry. So it's very common thing, and people ignore that for those kind of sensor devices. Oh, it's working, no one cares about it. But how do you know it's really working? What if they recalibrate your PLC and it's using a different formula, the one that you should be using it? So there is another element you should look into in terms of the danger and risk. So ransomware is not only about blue screen and they're asking for, okay, I've stolen your data. They may not steal your data. And that's not always the case in OT. It's common in IT, but not in OT. They will just make a small tweak in your formula and produce totally different Kerrygold butter, which we sell. And think about product recall. It's a nightmare. And brand reputation, everything's damaged. And it's just such a small metal detector in a factory that caused this problem. So that's why we have to look for individual components.
Yep. One pointer I'll add for our audience as well, that like what Adnan is saying, absolutely right. I mean, we in cybersecurity, we talk about CIA or confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So there is this aspect of safety that can kinds of get added on top of it, right? Very good example, like metal goes, right? I mean, the same thing, think about pharma manufacturing. You have calibrators that put different chemicals and everything. So the safety aspect of it, more than availability, yes. Okay, availability is the top priority for manufacture, but the safety portion gets on top of it because now your human life also comes into the picture. So,
yeah, I think it just shows you how much more complex the question is when it relates to these environments, particularly in manufacturing. It's hard to think of anything that's manufactured that couldn't be impacted in that way and has safety concerns. So that's always the sort of key, should be the key consideration first as well. And I think that helps the conversations as well with your peers, because especially if you go and speak to the operations folks, and even when you go and speak to the board level, they understand these type of risks because it's normally built into their business. They just don't understand often that an affector can be cyber as opposed to somebody sneaking into the production line and switching chemicals or something like that. So often the folks, the engineers that put together these production lines have taken these risks into consideration, but not necessarily the vector of coming from cyber from the outside as well. So what would you say, and I guess I'll throw this out to Adnan to start with, but what are the biggest challenges that you hear about when you get together with industry peers in terms of getting the good defenses in place for ransomware?
You have to look for remediation mechanism more often than, so OT is totally different than IT. So you have to think about totally different ways of protecting your assets. If I'm protecting my laptop, the way I protect is totally different. I'm protecting an HMI PLC SCADA machine. It requires a different way of protection. In most cases, Amit actually mentioned about it, your devices could be 20 years old. So the solution is not, first thing, you may not have a patch available. How dare you are going to try to apply a patch of a machine which is 20-year-old? Are you going to take that risk? No, you're not going to take that risk. So what are you going to do? You look for mitigating factors. And one of the KPI that I provide to our exec is based on the mitigating factor. Legacy devices without mitigating control is one of my KPI. And why? Because I know that I won't be able to replace that PLC. Who's going to pay that $1 million to replace a PLC? But I have a mitigating control. Mitigating control is not only patching. It could be if this device doesn't require access to other PLCs, can you restrict the movement? So which is a network segmentation, micro segmentation. Is this device require external access? If not, then restrict that access, or look for tools like remote access tools available, which could allow you to restrict access, like jump box environment. We are working with Amit and his team around one of the POC around how you can use a jump box environment to allow access to individual PLCs rather than everything else. So mitigating controls, and you won't be able to apply the same mitigating control across all different devices because all devices require different way of mitigating control. But the key is you have to apply mitigating controls where you can't fix something. And it's very common in manufacturing, especially those legacy systems that you may not have luxury to replace it. In some cases, yes. Some of our factories are 5 or 6 years old and we need to replace HMIs. The problem we are going to face, a replacement of laptop could cost you $1,000. Replacement of a HMI, we are seeing it could cost you $10,000 to $15,000. So even 2 to 3 HMIs, your budget is gone. So it's different. You're talking at a totally different scale. But there are ways you can restrict movement. There are ways you can allow remote access with full governance that you need. There are also ways where you can apply patching. And when you look for patching, look for shared OT devices. The devices built by IT, used by OT. It could be shared desktop machines used in the production environment where people are just opening Excels. Why you're not applying patching? Yes, you can't apply every month because if you apply patching, a production staff may be using that machine, so you don't want to reboot it. But why can't you apply every 6 months or every 3 months with agreement with your operations guy? So there are still ways, but I would say mitigating controls are very important in OT world as compared to IT. If I have any vulnerability on your laptop, I'll just replace it, $1,000, no problem. I can't do the same thing with HMI or SCADA machines.
Yeah, I think that this is a good point. It sort of leads us into the next sort of interesting point that I guess on the IT side, you have, like you said, Patch Tuesday and patching has sort of like that's the frontline defense and they're very low cost scenarios, right? For that type of thing. Obviously, there are 0 days, then there's the gap and you need to run, and then there are lots of other tools, but relatively it's kind of straightforward line of defense. But in manufacturing environments in particular, where you have both that and the OT side and everything between. So there's always this feeling that manufacturers need to balance the need for that operational uptime, which is key, obviously, safety first, uptime, productivity, etc. And they need to balance that with how strong those compensating controls or mitigating controls that you can put around these critical systems. Often you can't defend them on the system. So again, that often introduces conflict or definitely friction, both between the people that actually own those assets within the operations or the engineering side, or the OT cybersecurity. And I think there was a question in the chat before about OT convincing IT that they can or can't do this in this environment. So, I mean, what would you say to how to sort of, again, I know that's very complex depending on the individual company, but as a high level rule, what would you say to the formula of balancing this need for operational uptime and safety compared to the cybersecurity controls that we would like to put in place? Navdeep, would you like to kick that one off?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very interesting question, right? How do we how to balance this, right?
Yeah.
So basically, we have to keep in mind that we know that uptime is important for and efficient operation equipment efficiency, right? When we are dealing with the network. And to implement cyber controls efficiently, we have to make sure that we are building the intent-based security with context and visibility. That is very much important, right? And we have to make our aim to make sure that we have this cyber service management overall to be very proactive, expert-driven, and attack-focused. And we have to move away from the reactive alert-driven systems, right? This is very important. Then only you can balance out that what are your priorities. For that, whatever I said, we should look for building accelerators into your systems, right? When we deploy solutions, we have to have an accelerators. We have to have an interactive CISO dashboards ready to deploy use case libraries, right? And we have the tools to do that. We have SIM, we have SOAR, and then all these use case libraries can be mapped to meter attacks. We can have a continuous GRC maturity management, which is an easy way to have it, right? At least we have the visibility. And then we can contextualize all the intelligence, right? And we can fusion it to the SOC operations. And we can unify the whole cyber recovery platform, right? And ultimately, we can have the continuous risk-based visibility, vulnerability orchestration can be done, right? So when we implement that, we can start with the basic thing. First, we have to bring the context, build the security on the intent-based, bring more visibility, put accelerators in the DNA, and then ultimately move towards modernization via automation, AI, putting together zero trust architectures, where Xage is our best partner. Amit is here from Xage, and then do the SOC development. So we cannot jump directly to the SOC development. We have to go step by step. Security is a phase. This is the best way to do it, what I said. Thank you.
Would you gentlemen like to jump in there as well? Or?
Yes. I'll add on to it. I mean, and then we talked about it, right? These, and like Adnan, with Ornua's example, they operate in so many countries, right? Typically, what we have seen, a lot of CISOs kind of came from IT, and in good old days, I mean, you have a data center, whatever technology needs to be deployed, you possibly are deploying that in your primary and secondary data center. Now, after that, cloud made things much easier. I mean, deployment was easier. You can do it much. But now, when you go to the manufacturing space or industrial, where these industrial landscapes, you have factories not just in one country, possibly across all continent where people live, and how the deployments is going to be. So choose for solutions that can be deployed much easier. A lot of people like micro-segmentation path, right? A lot of people try to solve this with a problem with a firewall approach, right? Firewall can be very complex in that scenario, because now you're individually configuring a firewall going on to each side where you might not even have individual available. So all of a sudden, where you wanted to solve a problem in 3 months or 6 months, the problem becomes 6 years. And by the time you implement the project, I mean, you have 15 new problems that you will have to address. So how do you approach it? You opt for solutions that are distributed in nature. And because these are distributed environment, you should be able to go live from very first week, where you are implementing the product. You can have a phased approach that I'm addressing these factories in this phase. My solution is live. At least these factories are getting live with the solution. So kind of a phased approach, rollout that are non-intrusive. There are solutions that are non-intrusive along with others that are not blocker to the availability. So there needs to be a planning done. But I think with solutions available today, I mean, this is not so complex that it will not take that much of time that it should. So
perfect. I realize we won't have time to get to all of the questions that we have here coming in from the Q&A, and there's a lot in the chat as well. But I'm sure the folks from the panel would be happy to follow up. I'm going to pull one of the questions out from the Q&A. We only have 5 minutes left. It's a very sort of interesting question, because it also talks to some of the complexity that we haven't yet touched on the panel within this environment, and that's talking about third-party OEMs in this particular case. So the question, it comes from Madhu. He says, like, for example, on remote access and standardization. And his question is, well, most OEMs have their own solutions for coming in, which they do. We all know that. And they have the ones that they either make or like, or they would love to go around every customer and use their platform. The problem is you sometimes have 100 of them in your environment and they're all coming in on different platforms. And it was something that came up in an earlier session or panel as well. It's like, you need to flip that. It's you're the asset owner. You're the one holding the risk. You need to be able to take control. So the question that he asks is, how do you get them to conform to your standards to ensure that you have that single point that can be monitored and for compliance and for security, etc., rather than having to sort of bend for them. And I think there's two parts to this question. I'll let everybody get 1 minute because that's all we have, but it has to do also with the size of your organization. I think the power something is also something. When you have power with the OEM, you can sort of shift them in your direction. But again, it's another level of complexity in this environment. So Adnan, do you want to jump in for a minute and then we'll pass it around?
I think one of the answers you already gave, it depends on how much buying power you have with those OEM vendors. So companies like Orno, we're not as big as other like Unilever. So we can't dictate big OEM vendors and saying, here is my solution, you start using it. The best way to start doing it is to go with the greenfield implementation first, making sure you have a remote access solution implemented, and then go each site one by one, start replacing their existing solution with the one that you're for a better governance. So for example, if you already have a OEM vendor who is using your, then it's a lot easier because they already installed a software that you have given to them. Then you say, okay, if I'm going with Xage, they should install Xage client utility. But for me, the client utility that we allow our OEM vendor to connect is my plan B. I don't even tell our vendors that we have this support available. The idea I have in our case, and that's what I've seen in the other colleagues in CISO community are doing it, is saying, you come to my portal. From my portal, we'll give you a jump box. From there, you can connect. So you have direct connectivity to your PLC and you can't see anything else. Everything is controlled, managed, video recorded, governed. And in that case, the vendor doesn't need to install anything. We're not asking them to install anything, but it is a long journey. But if you start trying to convince all OEM vendors day one, it's not going to work. Start in phases.
And few more pointers I will add, right? I mean, for these third-party accesses, so you're deciding on secure remote access solution and all that. You look for, that's your secure remote access solution is not your VPN type of solution, because then again you are getting into the legacy of it. You are not solving any problem. By remote access, what you mean is, what are the capabilities that you have? What controls are you putting on it for these third parties? Are your sessions getting recorded? Do you have authorization in place? Do you have role-based access? Do you have just-in-time access, right? So you have control on your landscape, right? I mean, I have seen, but the good part is now we are seeing this wave that people have understood the risk of it. And idea is to be successful, that what else your solution can do, so that you don't have to deploy 2 or 3 different solutions that you have to manage. So it needs to be like, if your remote access solution can give you privilege access management capabilities, why not? I mean, then you go for it. Do you have password vaulting as well into it built in? Go for it. That way you are increasing the ROI as well, right? So that's what we are seeing. Navdeep, if
yeah, I will
give
like
you
to
30
add
seconds, Navdeep, if you can.
Yeah, I will make it, no
stop on it.
problem. So
Perfect.
basically, we have to also look at how much horsepower each partner is bringing in particular sectors, like Amit mentioned about SRA. Then we have to also look into the compliance angle, because manufacturing sectors they are getting under pressure for compliance as well. And compliance is, in short, can be in 2 types. Like, one is operational, which can be NUC, CIF, FIPS, and whatnot, and one is process specific, which can be SOX, COBIT, etc. And then we also have in manufacturing IEC, ISA 91, C2, M2, TISAX. So imagine that, as Amit mentioned, the SRA, what Xage gives us, it is aligned with the TSA directives, right? So see how we are choosing this horsepower in different sectors where we are covering the compliance angle also. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very quick answer. I appreciate it. So thank you to all the panel members. Amit, Adnan, Navdeep, thank you very much. It's been great. I wish we could have gone on for another 45 minutes. There's definitely a lot more to talk about. We're going to grab a quick 15 or 14-minute recharge break. So grab coffee, stretch your legs, do what you need to do to reset. We're going to head into the final track sessions. It's a great time also to visit the sponsors, go and speak to the agents out there as well. I noticed a couple of questions about the product as well. Go out there and speak to them. Hit the expo floor. They're there to chat, and we will be back for the session tracks at 3 p.m. Eastern exactly, and lots of great content still to come. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank
you.
you.